That
Good evening,
scared me
and
so much.
I'm sorry about that. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Master PraQ Day 2. Today we have with us Shikha, an 18-year-old from Pennsylvania, USA, and she is going to talk about entrepreneurship. Shikha is an upcoming biomedical engineering student. She creates a variety of creative work aside from music or healthcare to poetry on personal blog and on Instagram. She also loves to read fantasy novels, draw video games characters, and of course, play with it. She's had her music and poetry published in a variety of magazines and on various Instagram channels as well. But the majority of her work is just for fun. She's also the co-founder of Astral Cognition, an international platform which encourages and boosts creativity. So thank you so much, Shikha, for coming in over here and presenting your work. The stage is all yours now.
Thank you so much, Rajvi. Let me just share my screen so that we can get this going. All right, there you go. So hi everyone, my name is Shikha, and like Rajvi said, I am one of the co-founders of Astral Cognition, which is an international nonprofit organization that tries to empower and teach creatives how to become more uh, successful in an online environment. And today I'm going to be talking about how to become a more successful entrepreneur. So, first off, I just want to give a brief definition on what an entrepreneur is. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what constitutes as an entrepreneur. So, the dictionary definition is someone who operates or organizes a business taking on greater than normal financial risks to do so. And so, what this essentially means is that you can have a business of any kind. It doesn't need to be of any particular kind. I think a lot of people kind of misconstrue that only, you know, it's either financial or medical, that these people are the only entrepreneurs. You can be entrepreneurs in any sort of field, including a creative one. So for example, you could be an entrepreneur in a like artistic field, in a writing field, in any of those kind of fields as well. Oops, there we go. And I think one key thing before I start getting into the tips is that having the right attitude is definitely important. Beyond any of these tips that I give you, having the right attitude is essential to being a good entrepreneur. You need to be able to sort of take the rises and falls as they come, because there are going to be some uh, moments that are worse than others, and there are going to be some moments where it might look like your business is failing, or it might look like that your endeavor is not going to be successful. And I encourage you to just think about, you know, it's easy to get lost in the moment, but think about how far you've come to get to that point. So your attitude is definitely one of the most important things when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And so there are two sort of sides of pretty much all entrepreneurs. There's the sort of rational side, which is trying to learn as much as you can of the principles behind what you're doing in order to get your point across, in order to, get all of those people supporting your initiative, getting all of those people to, come and be your audience. And then there's the creative thinking side, which is, finding new ways to solve problems or create content that are unique to you or your organization or, the field as a whole. And so I'm just going to go through these one by one and give you a couple of things to think about when you're becoming an entrepreneur. So, first off, we're going to start off with the rational side of things, because I think this is what everyone sort of thinks about when they think about tips. They usually think about oh, for one thing, use social media effectively, right? A lot of people will say insights and your metrics are really, really important to knowing what your audience likes, knowing what content you should create. And while I do agree with this, I think it's more important to realize that like you can use these metrics to strike a balance between what you post and what your audience wants. Right? Just as much as your audience, obviously wants a certain type of content, you are allowed to have freedom in choosing what you want to post, right? It's your business, it's your social media feed. So I think it's more important to look at this in terms of like how can you strike a balance between what you want and what your audience wants. And for that, insights and metrics are insanely helpful. I know that Instagram recently came out with insights on Reels, which is a huge, huge thing. And I would really encourage, like, especially if you're starting out and you're just starting to get like an audience, ensuring that um both your reach and your uh view count is high, then you know what your audience likes. Another thing is just to research your idea. So know the general gist of what you're doing. And one easy way to do this that I've found is just figure out like the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. So what this essentially means is who is going to be your audience? What do they want from you, or what are you going to give them? Where are they going to be able to find this content or service that you're providing for them? Why do they need this content, and how are you going to give it to them? So if you just like cover all of these bases, you basically have what I call like a sort of it's called a portfolio or a guide, a brand guide. And essentially what it is, it's just, why is your brand important? Why do people care about it? Why should I, as like a person outside of your organization, care about what you're doing? And the more you spend time on figuring out all of these things, the more clear and concise your brand idea and your brand personality is going to be. So it's very essential. And this kind of falls into it, but staying organized throughout the entire process is so, so, so important. I know it's really like tempting to like just go and do things, and I definitely am uh not one to say that, being strictly organized is like the right thing to do. Obviously, there's going to be some sort of impulsivity or some sort of like desire to just try things out and see how they go. But the most important thing is just to keep all of these sort of important documents, like, your research documents, your insights, your any data that you have or collect, keeping those in a specific place is really, really helpful. And it becomes really important as you grow, because then you can use it to collaborate with other people. You can show other people how good your brand is. You can show other people how your organization or your brand or whatever is making a difference, or is really important. And so keeping these things organized is really important, especially in the beginning. Just to make sure that like you have all these things for when the right time comes. And finally, I mentioned this earlier, but create a portfolio or guide. Sorry, I just like skipped ahead there somehow. But I mentioned this earlier, but portfolios are essentially like a really long-ish document where you just talk about what your brand is, why it's important, how you're meeting the audience's needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really technical, and I personally don't really enjoy making these, but they are so, so, so important when you want anything done. Um, Especially when you want later down the line, if you are thinking of getting certified, or if you're thinking of getting any sort of collaborations with larger influencers or organizations, they are going to ask for a brand guide or a brand portfolio, because it's easy for them to just read a little bit about what you're about rather than you sending a bajillion files, each with like, a little bit on what you're about. So creating that portfolio or guide early is something that I would highly recommend. And I kind of wish I had done it earlier for astral cognition, but you know, uh, learn from my mistakes, I guess. But it's really, really important that you at least have, if not a very detailed guide, at least bare bones something that's about what your organization is about. It doesn't have to be very detailed, doesn't have to be very like, fancy, especially in the beginning. You don't have to make it fancy, but as your organization evolves, you'll be able to edit that guide, edit that portfolio, and sort of make it more clear
Bareta to me.
what your organization is about. And now we're going to go on to the creative thinking / creativity aspect of entrepreneurship. This is something that I think a lot of people don't really think about, especially because I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like inherently creative. So it's like, oh, we just need to, figure out how we're going to do that. Right. But the creative thinking aspect really does help you with regards to creating that idea and formulating it in the first place. So let's just go through some things that might help you. Oh, yeah, one of the biggest things that I see everyone do is they want to create content all the time. Don't do it. It's really harmful to you and your mental health. What I would recommend you do, to avoid like burnout, which if you don't know what burnout is essentially when your mental state is just like you are so done with whatever you're making, right? You can't really think of anything you're creating. Sometimes it leads into a state of depression for a bit. And depending on how intense your burnout is, it can be absolutely terrible and take weeks or months to get out of. I've seen people take like years off of organizations or companies that they've started as well, just because they burnt themselves out to that extent. So one of the best ways to like avoid burnout in general is just create content or create whatever it is, like services your business offers. Create, like, do it in bursts, right? Do it in like what I do. I mean, I mostly do graphic design and writing. So those are really heavily into the creative aspect of it. So what I do is I usually like will take a couple of weeks to just create the content that I'm going to put out, and then I take a month-ish off. Now depending on how I feel, I adjust that, but that's been my cycle for the past couple of months or so, and it's been working wonders. And I haven't felt burnt out at all. So it's really important to just find that cycle that works for you. Just try different lengths of time creating, and as soon as you start to see the signs of burnout, which you can search it up online. I think a lot of the most common ones are fatigue and just overall negativity towards the content you're creating. Those are the big ones that I've seen, but as soon as you start to see the signs of burnout, stop for a bit. Just take a break, relax. It'll be, you can get back to it a different day. Another thing is just to daydream. Daydreaming is actually proven to help foster imagination, and it's actually the other way around as well. Imagination, being highly imaginative causes you to daydream more, which is a weird cycle. But it actually helps you like learn how to think outside the box and find different solutions to problems that might already exist. And it helps you really like find these ideas in the first place, and you can use these ideas or these solutions as business ideas at the end of the day. So if you're looking to create a new startup, a new business, a new whatever, daydreaming or imagining solutions to these scenarios might be the way for you. Another thing is that is really, really important, and that really hasn't. I've really seen this more throughout the pandemic, and I've been promoting it more throughout the pandemic. Is just like bounce your ideas off other people. Um, talk to other people about your ideas. Talk to, maybe friends or family about what you want to do. Because the thing is, with talking about things, sometimes other people have concerns about this solution that you might not have thought of, right? Other people's views on things are different, and as such, you can get a more nuanced view of what your solution will mean to them. And so that's really important, especially when you're starting out, because you want your identity to be as clear, but also as like succinct as possible. You want to be able to, like, if someone asks you what is your brand about, you want to be able to have a couple of sentences that describe what your brand is about, that describe what your company is about, that describe what you are about, right? If you're starting your own personal business. Um, and talking it through with other people can really help you get to that point where you can actually have a more succinct or more um, like clear and concise statement that you can say, like, this is what it's about, this is what I'm about, this is what the brand is about. And finally, one last thing that I want to talk about is just like learn about yourself. I found that like a lot of these problems that a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, especially like burnout and stuff like that, comes from the fact that we aren't really in touch with ourselves a lot of the time. Because it can be really easy to get caught up in work, and it can be really easy to be like, oh yeah, I want to do this. But at the end of the day, your body is kind of what's supporting you. So you have to be sure that, you're listening to it, you're taking your needs as seriously as possible, because at the end of the day, when you do fall into that sense of burnout, you're not going to get anything done. Yeah, nothing's going to get done. Nothing's really going to happen. So, you want to like avoid that by, figuring yourself out, taking breaks as much as necessary, and ensuring that you're not, overworking yourself. So this is just like a couple of reminders to keep in mind. I've talked about this a lot. Burnout sucks. Do not go to find resources online, find people that can help you if you find yourself being burnt out, but listen to your needs as much as possible so that you can, not experience that. I wouldn't wish that burnout experience on anyone. It is absolutely terrible. Keep your energy up. Make sure to like eat and rest regularly. That goes with, listening to your body, that whole thing. Just make sure you're like not ignoring your needs and taking care of yourself, you know. Um Always ask questions. This is something that like I think a lot of people are scared to do because like, they don't want to be seen as like unknowledgeable in a particular field, but asking questions is actually really helpful both for you and for the person that you're asking the questions to, right? For you, you can get more information that way than just looking it up online. If you ever come into contact with an expert or with someone that is knowledgeable in a particular field, ask questions, right? They won't think that you're, unknowledgeable in a certain field. And in fact, they might actually think that you are really interested in the same field that they are. And thus, you have a new connection. You can go to that person for, anything really at that point. But it really helps to just like keep asking questions and keep, gathering information even after you've started your brand, right? Social media and the real world is always evolving. Technology is always evolving. It's always really, really important to keep on top of like what is happening, as a whole in your niche. Um, and again, like look for experts. Look if especially when you're starting out, look for people that have already done a particular thing in your field. Look for people, and it doesn't have to really be talking to people either. You can, if you, I know, for example, that when I started astral cognition with Raji, we were having a lot of trouble with our designs. And so I would look at, these really big accounts and, what designs they had, what design tips people had. And as such, I was able to hone in my style really, really quickly because I was just like sort of, I wasn't mimicking them, but I was kind of like taking what I learned from them and applying them in the designs. So, look towards experts, look for experts in your field of or your niche. And I'm like 90% sure that like nearly all of them would be happy to help you if you like asked, right? There are very few people that don't want to help you, and those people are not really worth your time anyway. So just like ask them for, tips or whatever they can give you, and you both will be a lot better off, I think. And obviously, do your best. Not every idea will be 100% successful. And it will take, there will be a lot of ups and downs. And it's totally okay. You as long as you're trying as much as you can, you are doing something amazing. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. All right, and that's pretty much it. I'd love to hear if you guys have any questions. My contact information is on the screen, so you can take that and email me as well if you don't feel comfortable talking about it in a room full of people. But thank you guys for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Rajvi, please, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Shikha, for such an amazing and insightful session. The floor is now open to all our guests for any questions or anything. It's time
Okay.
for you to ahead.
Uh, yeah, I have a question. Wonderful session, Shika. It was really very informative, and we got an in-depth knowledge about what to be done and what not to be done. One thing which you mentioned about creativity. So, can you just a little bit elaborate on visual imagination and creative thinking? A few pointers.
So I'm by nature a very visual person, which is why I took up graphic design in the first place. And I think visual thinking is definitely one way to get, to be more imaginative, because then you're actually like seeing what could happen, right? But I think more important than that, like you could argue that a more fundamental portion of it is just being able to like think about the future and the consequences of actions. And that's called metacognition, which is a really big word that essentially just means that like you're thinking about thinking. Um, and what metacognition really encompasses is just that like if you are able to think about how other people will not only react to your brand, but also how they will respond to, engagement questions or all these other things that, I mean, marketing wise, you're kind of supposed to do, but, engagement questions, sort of like, these audience related things. If you're able to think about how the masses will react to that, I think you're already in a good place. And if you can't, then just like, think about one thing that was helpful for me especially was like learning a little bit about human behavior. I know psychology is not like everyone's cup of tea, but I really do think that learning a little bit about like people's behavior and how they will react to certain words or certain things, especially in terms of like brand identity. So for example, there's so many things that go into a brand, right? Like the shape of your logo, the colors of your logo, the fonts that you use. And you don't have to break it if it seems overwhelming, you don't have to break it down immediately, like, as soon as you start out, but it's a good thing to keep in mind when you're just, like, getting that audience, like, how does how does this brand's appearance dictate what people are doing with it? and really being able to think about that is like the key goal there, right? So it's not so much like visual thinking, more so than just like thinking about how other people will think about things. And I think that's really like the point of what I'm trying to like get at here. It's like that there's being a visual thinker is obviously like, you know, it has its ups and downs. Same with like every other type of like auditory listeners and auditory thinkers and all that kind of stuff. Excuse me. But I think at the end of the day, what really, really, really matters is just like being able to adjust your brand to what you want to convey, and vice versa as well, what you want to convey being a part of your brand. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I kind of went on a rant there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Shikha.
Any other questions from any of our audience? Bharti ma'am, Nisha ma'am, Ruth ma'am, Vivaan, Diga, any questions for Shikha? Ruth ma'am, you are mute. I'm sorry, you'll have to unmute yourself. Ruth ma'am, please switch on your mic because we can't hear you right now. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
You may go ahead now.
I enjoyed it, though I was feeling a bit sleepy in between. I was dozing, but the same. I really liked that the saying, whatever she said, very clear.
Thank you.
in
Thank
whatever
you for that.
described.
Any other questions from any other audience? Can you please stop scared?
I really appreciate when Ruth is dozing. So I think you have Shikha, you have made your this thing point that your presentation was fantastic. So she was so engrossed in your presentation that she felt sleepy. Great.
Start dreaming about the presentation. That's amazing. Shikha, can you please stop sharing the screen? Sorry. I've just, thank you so much. Any other questions from anyone? Thank you, Usha ma'am, for that heads up. Any other questions from anyone?
Is the area totally itself new to me, so asking questions would be very difficult.
Okay. Whom do we have? Rati ma'am, do you want to ask anything? Hello, designer. Do you want to ask anything? Or Bharti ma'am, Veena ma'am, Vivaan ji? Any questions? Any comments? Well, awesome. Looking at me that no questions, no comments. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Oh, shit, Bharti ma'am has a question, I guess. Go ahead, Bharti ma'am.
I just wanted to say thank you. It was a lovely session. I just want to ask a question. Like you said, like entrepreneurship is taking risk. We also have to make investment. So what can we do to reduce the risk? To be on the other side.
I think
I have control on our investment, maybe.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think a lot of people will ask as well. So there's like I just want to preface this. There's always going to be some amount of risk with anything you do, right? It doesn't even have to be entrepreneurship related. It can be like in your daily life. There's always a certain amount of risk. Like driving a car, you know, car accidents happen. But you take that risk every day because you are confident in your abilities to drive and to maneuver a 3-ton vehicle. So I think the same thing applies to like entrepreneurship. If you do research into what investments you want, like what your potential investments are, or into what potential investors are looking for, and you put yourself into that mindset, after a certain point, you will become confident in your abilities to, properly pick out which investments will be good investments and which won't be. But it does take a little bit of, back and forth at the beginning, especially when you're like really new to a field, in general. But what I've learned is that you're not gonna get anywhere unless like you actually try. And so like with me for like graphic design, which is a little different than investments. But like, you know, for graphic design, I was terrible at it. I was absolutely terrible at it. But then, you know, as I like figured out more and more what I wanted to convey with my designs and what I wanted, like what I prioritized, in terms of like, you know, what I consider to be an effective design, my designs got better because I was able to practice that skill over time. And I think the same thing applies to investments or for anything really in particular. So that would be my general advice.
Thank you for that. That was a good one.
Thank you so much, Bharti ma'am, for such an amazing question. Any further questions? We have new people coming who just joined us right now. So thank you so much for joining in. So this talk was on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship thinking. So welcome to the room, Sandeep ji and Neelam ji. If you have any question related to entrepreneurship, feel free to go ahead and ask them now. If anyone else has any questions, any comments, the stage is still open.
Yeah, one more question, Shikha. Now, you might have done for corporates, you might have done from education institutions. Can you share one of the examples wherein how people respond and how they see design aspect in terms of colors or in terms of the patterns, different patterns? So if you can share a little bit your experience into this, it will help us a lot.
Yeah. So I'm going to be intentionally vague because I'm still working with this company and I don't know how much of this information I'm allowed to give out. So pardon me for being a little bit more vague. But I do work for this company that is really all about like, you know, focus and zen and like this sort of like, you know, making sure that writers in particular can focus on their writing and become more effective writers, right? And I do graphic designs for them. I've been doing it for a while actually. And I think one of the things that I first said to them was like, I'm not going to use any of the reds that you have on your color palette, right? Because when we think of red, what we think of like, you know, aggression. Like think of all the war related movies that you've seen. There is almost always going to be either a red or orange filter on top of those movies because they are depicting something that is gruesome, that is violent. And although red has, you know, more positive meanings as well, a lot of times people will associate it with negative emotions and negative feelings because, you know, this is what the movie industry has primed us to to think to some extent. Even romance movies have a lot of use of red and blue in them because of, you know, red is supposed to be like passionate and you know, lovey-dovey and all that sort of thing, which really goes against, you know, the whole zen feeling that they want with their, you know, application. And so one thing that's been really successful for us is like keeping it minimalist, which, you know, focuses in on like the whole focus aspect of their mission statement. And also, you know, keeping it, you know, to shades of blue or green. Mostly green because their design is green, but you know, green is you know, you see it in like nature a whole lot. And I think a lot of people will agree that, you know, nature can be really calming and really, you know, if you go out, I used to live in a very rural area, and if I went out into like this like huge forest we had in the back, it was massive. If I went out back there, it was like an immediate sense of calm. It was like there was like a quiet hush over that area. And I think that's what a lot of people associate when they think of nature, right? And so in terms of visual design, green is probably green and or muted yellows are probably the best when it comes to invoking that sense of calm. Yellow would be more for a little bit of energy, but you know, it's when you're thinking about what you want visually for your brand, you have to think about like, where do we see these things in real life, which can be, you know, it can be really easy for things like green, right? Like I live like there's trees right now outside that are green, there's grass that's green, there's like you know, there's a lot of like meadows around here that are green as well. But it can be a little bit harder for things like purple, right? Like purple is a synthetic color, which is why not a lot of brands use purple. Because it does convey a sense of rarity. It conveys a sense of like, because we don't see it that often, it conveys that sense of like, oh, I am rare, I am important, I am, that kind of thing. And so I think when you're talking about color psychology, which is what your question was getting at, think about where you see these things in real life, right? Like what have we come to associate with these colors? And that'll really help you like hone in on what colors you want for your brand, right? So for example, I used green for them because they wanted zen and they wanted, that sort of calming effect. And it doesn't have to stop at like visual design. It can also be how you present it, right? So for example, I said the minimalist thing. Having minimalism does convey a sense of focus because you're literally focused on the one thing that is being presented in front of you, right? Minimalism is when you get rid of all of the extra stuff, and you just have bare bones, like a bare bones thing. So it doesn't have to just be color psychology. It can also be like what you're putting on there, what shapes you're using, what what you're like. There's a lot of different aspects, really. But yeah, color psychology. What I would recommend is just like you can also look this up, but I think it's much more effective to like look at where these colors are used, because then you get a real sense of like how major film producers will use it and stuff like that.
That was amazing.
Thank you, Shikha. Lovely explained.
Any other questions from anyone else? Okay. Thank you so much for joining in today. We have this Master PraQ session every Friday and Saturday, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. IST. We'll be having new guests coming in every Friday and every Saturday talking about different topics, and you'll be informed about those topics within a day or two. So thank you so much for joining in, and it was a pleasure having each one of you over here.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Shikha, we request you to stay back in the room, please. Thank you. The guests, you may leave now. Thank you so much for being here today with us.